Our guest this morning is John Warren. John is an upstate business guy. He is running for governor of South Carolina in the Republican primary. I said earlier today, I sense some similarities John's smarter than I am. He's more trained than I am. He's got a better resume than I do. But the one commonality we have is running as a business guy outsider. And I do believe there's a high level of intrigue with anybody who runs as a business guy outsider.
Absolutely. I think I'm better looking too.
You are much younger. You're much younger.
And I'm here for my T-shirt.
Okay, how old are your kids?
My kids are 2.5 and 4 months.
Okay, well, come back and see me when they're about 25 and 26, and I'm sure we'll have another story to be told. That hair will turn gray. And anyway,
fair enough.
That's something for another day. John, I want to talk a little bit about the race. We've got an entrenched incumbent, not necessarily as elected governor, but somebody who's been a part of South Carolina politics for a long, long time. And then we got a couple of people who, I call yourself and Catherine Templeton, the other top-tier candidates. What distinguishes you from Henry and Catherine?
So I talk about leadership. The race comes down to leadership. And my experience in leading 300 combat missions and building a successful company, I really believe leadership comes down to a person's core values, their core competencies, and whether or not they have courage. So just starting with the first category of core values, I am a true conservative. When you look at my opponents, Governor McMaster, he supports huge bureaucracies. He supports liberals. And Catherine Templeton, I really think she's a Democrat. You know, she gave money to your opponent, Ken. Did you know that? She gave money to your opponent. She also voted for Vincent Shaheen. And when everyone else in the conservative movement was fighting Obama, she didn't bother to vote in Republican presidential primaries in 2008 and 12. You can't be a conservative and give money to Dems. In terms of core competencies, I'm the only one that's actually created a job. None of them know anything about the economy because they've never really been in the economy. We have 2 lawyers, 2 career politicians, 2 government insiders. We need someone that's actually been accomplished and successful in running a business so that we can bring those efficiencies to state government. And then finally, we need someone with courage to take on the good old boy system. And you can't fight the good old boy system with 2 good old boys. And that's really what they are.
I want to shift gears and talk about a reality. You know this. And I would argue the only person with less yank in Columbia than the governor is the lieutenant governor. But you've got to talk about ideas and things you believe in and things you're passionate about. But we do live in a legislative state. We do live in a state, and there's a lot of reason constitutionally that it was done. Some I'm absolutely opposed to, adamantly opposed to. But we live in a state that the governor has restricted ability to influence legislation. How do you navigate those waters? You are the chief executive of the state, but you really don't have the ability and authority to direct policy.
So the way I think about it is we're considering it. My wife and I are considering being governor in 8-year deployment to take on a political insurgency in Colombia. And you've got to have realistic expectations of what you can accomplish and when. One of the staggering facts that I've learned on the campaign trail is that we have 110 state agencies. And that, like you said, the governor only controls 16. But with those 16, that equals $10 billion of our overall budget. So when you get in there, attack the agencies that you can control and make them more efficient and make them run better. We need to take a look at it as it's customer service, and the taxpayers are the ones that are the customers. So I believe that we can influence those 16 agencies so well and then apply pressure to do that across all 110. And that would change a lot of government in South Carolina. But then ultimately, you have to have a plan to change the legislature. And I'm going to take it one step further than Nikki Haley did. I'm going to find quality candidates to run against these Republicans that continue to betray the Republican platform. I'm going to help them get financing, and I'm going to campaign with them. And then we're going to change the legislature, because most of the legislature, I think they're good people and they're conservatives and they want to get these reforms done. But there are a few bad apples, especially in the Senate. And we've got to get some of those people out of there so that we can get real reforms done. We've got to have more accountability in places like DOT. It needs to be a cabinet level agency. Education needs to be a cabinet level agency. There are a lot of people that support those reforms. We've just got to get the few that don't out of there.
Philosophically, I believe that this is a contrast election. I think South Carolina is perceived a certain way at the national level. I don't believe we're that any longer. I think we're a forward-looking state. I think we're a dynamic state. I think about your part of the state, Michelin and BMW, and then you go down to Charleston, and we've got a coast and a tourism industry. When you talk about looking forward or looking back, think of South Carolina 10 or 15 years from now. What do you see to move this state even further. And I don't use progressive in a liberal way. They've kind of hijacked that word. I think progressive is a good descriptive. But what do you see as the priorities to lead South Carolina and our kids and your kids to a better and brighter future?
When I travel across the state, I see that certain areas of the state are advancing and their lives are getting better. And then a lot of parts of the state, they're getting left behind. And if you look at the report that came out the other day in the Post and Courier of where the economic development is occurring, it's occurring in Charleston, it's occurring in Greenville, it's occurring in Lexington, and it's occurring in Myrtle Beach. But one of the places it's not occurring is the PD region. It is not occurring here. And I think Florence has amazing opportunity. It has 2 interstates. It has a rail hub. It has a trucking hub. It has a great technical college. It has 2 great hospitals. There's tons of opportunity here, but unless someone with true leadership gets in the governor's mansion to make sure the entire state advances, the PD is going to get left behind. And I want to solve that. I've spent a ton of time down here. I care about the people, and I think there's tremendous opportunity to really expand the economic opportunities here.
John, in politics, we're famous for division. We've got, a certain group of people that vote a certain way, another group of people who vote another way. I believe the rural-urban dynamic is something the government has to understand. The plight of rural America. I grew up in a town with no stoplight, but I grew up in a town at a time when there was some promise and hope in that community. You talked about all the economic development in these metropolitan areas of South Carolina. Does the government need to address fundamentally and directly the plight of rural South Carolina, and what sort of policies or proposals do you offer to advance people who grow up in a rural part of South Carolina?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. If you look at really what South Carolina excels in, it's recruiting businesses, and the businesses that they recruit go to the larger metropolitan areas. You mentioned Greenville, it's Michelin, it's BMW. In Charleston, it's Boeing, it's Volvo. The places that get left behind are the rural areas. And if you look at the heart of our state, 60 to 80% of all the jobs in all the counties, they're small businesses. And we have got to protect the small businesses, the people that open the small shops, the people that open the restaurants, the average person that is hardworking, pays taxes, and wants a better life. And that goes down to our tax system and our education system. Our taxes, there are only about 10 states in the entire country that have higher taxes than South Carolina, and that's a terrible thing. And the ones that bear the burden for that are the small business owners. And our education system, in some of these areas, there's no hope. We're 50th in education. It's not because we don't spend enough money. Liberals, their solution to everything is spend more money. But we spend over $13,000 per year per student. And the problem is less than half of it actually reaches the classroom. So I think education and then continuing to recruit companies. I mean, how hard is it to recruit a company to Florence when you have all of the logistics here already? I mean, we just got to have a governor that cares about this region, and we got to have a senator that actually cares about all of the region, just not as political cronies.
This is not something as governor you'd be in charge of, but I'd love to hear your answer, because I do think the governor has a bully pulpit, and they can use the bullhorn of that pulpit. I preached for 3 or 4 or 5 years that I believe the education system is broken, not only public education, K through 12, but the telling of every child in South Carolina, the only way to be successful is a 4-year degree. You got to go to Carolina. You got to go to Clemson. You got to go to Furman. You got to go to Wofford. You got to go to College of Charleston. When indeed, I don't accept that as reality. Your perspective on the trek of education, the path a young person needs to travel to be successful in whatever walk of life they choose.
Our children, regardless of whether they graduate high school or college, they are oftentimes not prepared to get a job. The purpose of education should be to train them to get a job and support their family. One of the stats that has been staggering to me was there's an HR manager of a very large corporation here. She told me that in another state, it takes 6 applicants to find 1 quality employee. In South Carolina, it's 26. So our kids are not prepared. We need to bring back trade schools. We need to bring back SHOP. We need to encourage apprenticeships. We need to encourage internships. We need to have our technical colleges coordinating with the industry in that region to really prepare the kids to where maybe they only need an associate's degree. Maybe they only need a couple classes. I mean, BMW, you can start out making $85,000. That's amazing money. So rather than go to a 4-year school, come out with $150,000 debt and get a $30,000 job because you were a poli-sci major. Maybe we should use some common sense and prepare people for getting real jobs.
John, I ask every Republican I bump into, and I think it's the most interesting question in politics today. You've got a guy as the head of your party, and my party for that matter, who is not a conservative. He's a little bit different. Now, let me back up. That's very kind. He's a lot different in the way he goes about his business, but he's a doer. A lot of people in America believe politics has become an academic exercise. And you got a guy now who's a business guy. He's a doer. But he's not a fundamental conservative. I think you would agree with that. He's not ideologically driven. Your take on Trump leading the Republican Party, you say you're a conservative. How do you deal with a Donald Trump who probably is not ideologically a conservative?
Well, first of all, I wake up every morning and I'm ecstatic when I come to the realization that Hillary Clinton is not my president. I mean, I thought she was going to destroy the country, and I thought it was over. And I thought, honestly, I didn't think Trump had any chance of winning, but he won. And when he got up to D.C., he shook the area up. And policy-wise, he's done more policy-wise in getting things done than any president that I can remember since Reagan. And we got a Supreme Court justice who's conservative. We got tax reform. One of the things that doesn't get talked about is all of his executive actions in terms of turning back all these regulations. I think he's been policy-wise amazing for the country. And I think that's what you see when someone goes up there with practical business solutions. He cannot be bought. I've invested a lot of my money. I'm not beholden to anyone in South Carolina, the good old boys, because I don't need their money. I don't need their support. I'm going to Columbia to represent the taxpayer, and it's very similar.
This is the first time in South Carolina history that the governor and lieutenant governor will be elected together. You've not announced your lieutenant governor running mate. I'm not asking you who that is, but what sort of skill set are you looking for, and what will you ask your lieutenant governor to do in tandem in promoting and advancing your agenda?
Sure. So I think it's a great question. It goes back to the leadership. I want someone that is a true conservative, who has business sense, who has the right core values, who's been successful in the private sector, who hasn't just lived off of government. I mean, the one thing I thought was funny about Catherine Templeton choosing her running mate is that he doesn't even believe in her ticket because he's continuing to run for solicitor. So they're so insider that they're two people running for 3 offices. So with my candidate for LG, we're going to be committed to running for governor and lieutenant governor, and we're going to work as a team to really bring economic opportunity to South Carolina.
I always ask this question to someone who's first jaunt into politics. How do you deal with the nastiness? I mean, I don't want to be mean to people. I don't want people being mean to me. But politics is almost it's a place where you can get away with saying things about other people, and they can get away with saying things about you. That's very foreign to the world you've lived in, and it was very foreign to the world I grew up in. How do you deal with that? The back and forth and the nastiness of politics, because it is kind of a nature of the beast now.
I think the main difference between me and all of the other candidates is I'm trying to have people learn about my past. I want them to know about my biography. I'm not trying to hide anything. So they're in an awkward position to where I'm pretty hard to attack. What are you going to attack? You're going to attack me for going to serve my country for 4 years, lead Marines in combat? Are you going to attack me for building a business in South Carolina? So, the worst thing that they say is I'm stiff on stage. I am stiff on stage. Marines, we haven't had any theatrical training. I'm working on it, but, I just don't let it bother me. I think the more they attack me, the more I'm winning. So it's just about getting our positive message out there.
John, last question. This is more of a setup for you to tell our listeners, the millions and millions who hang on every word we utter every single morning of the week. Why is John Warren the best candidate? And I'll give you a chance to ask the voters or the listeners of this show to consider you as their choice.
I'm the best candidate because I have a track record of accomplishment in leading Marines in combat, in growing a successful company and creating hundreds of jobs. And then I am a true conservative. I will never, ever betray you. And I am running because I care about my state. I love my state. I'm a native. And we have everything going for us as a state except our state government. And we have to bring competent people to Columbia to run the state, or we're going to continue to go backwards.
And they can find out more by doing what?
They can go to our website, warrenforgovernor.com.